The night was hushed except for the whisper of wind in the dense forest. Laura Greene walked along the narrow trail, her breath quickening with every crunch of leaves. Suddenly, a sharp metallic odor filled the air, and her eyes darted toward the shadows. She whispered, "What is that smell?" But her trembling voice carried no comfort. The narrator described how Laura's flashlight beam shook violently, slicing through the fog, landing on a horrific sight, blood smeared against the bark of an ancient oak. A scream erupted in her throat, but died as she stepped closer, recognizing a familiar necklace lying beneath the tree. Laura said, "This can't be real." At that moment, the silence broke with a distant echo of footsteps. Her pulse thundered in her ears as the woods seemed to close in, suffocating her. A crow screeched from above, wings flapping in chaos, sending Laura stumbling backward. She gasped, "Someone's here with me," her fear radiating as the forest swallowed her cry. The narrator revealed that the scream Laura Greene almost released never left her lips, yet her fear spread through the woods like wildfire. She clutched the flashlight tighter, forcing herself to step forward. Her chest heaved as she whispered, "Stay calm, keep moving." Each rustle in the darkness made her heart pound harder, as though unseen eyes watched every trembling step. Suddenly, the sharp snap of a twig echoed behind her. Laura turned swiftly, but only shadows greeted her gaze. She muttered, "This place is alive with secrets." The wind gusted, scattering dry leaves into the air like confetti of doom. In her mind, fragments of her sister Emily Greene's laughter replayed, now tainted with dread. Laura whispered again, "I will find out what happened to you." The forest seemed to shiver with her vow, as though it knew the truth would demand a terrible price. The narrator described how the woods pulsed with silence, broken only by the echo of Laura Greene's rapid breathing. Her light fell upon a jagged tree stump, splintered and blackened, as though scarred by fire. She thought of Emily Greene's gentle voice, and her chest tightened. Laura whispered, "Why here? Why would you come into these woods?" A faint metallic clink echoed nearby, sending chills through her bones. She strained her ears, scanning the shifting fog. The air grew colder, frost seeping into her skin. The flashlight beam wavered across the stump, catching something carved deep into the wood, a crude symbol etched violently. Laura Greene leaned closer, muttering, "Someone left a warning." The forest groaned with a low howl of wind, branches scraping against each other like nails on glass. The narrator spoke of the cold grip of fear that wrapped tighter around Laura Greene's heart. She stumbled over roots, steadying herself as the darkness thickened. Her voice trembled as she whispered, "Emily, if you're out here, give me a sign." Suddenly, a low groan of branches snapped through the air, as though the woods themselves answered. Laura's breath caught, and her flashlight beam danced across skeletal trunks, illuminating nothing but emptiness. Yet in that emptiness lay a sense of presence, pressing closer. Her hands shook as she pressed forward, whispering, "I won't leave without you." With each step, the weight of grief mingled with fear, forging resolve inside her fragile frame. The narrator described how the forest seemed endless, trapping Laura Greene in its labyrinth of shadows. The sound of rushing water reached her ears, faint yet steady, guiding her steps like a dark melody. She followed, whispering, "Emily, is that you leading me?" The ground sloped downward, damp soil clutching at her shoes. The flashlight beam caught rippling water ahead, a small creek glowing faintly under pale moonlight. Yet near the bank, something darker marred the reflection. An object half buried in mud. Laura knelt, her heart pounding as she brushed soil away. Her hands froze. It was Emily Greene's red scarf, soaked and torn. Tears welled as she whispered, I swear I will uncover the truth." The forest remained silent, its secrets buried deep within. The narrator revealed that dawn broke over the small town of Pinewood, the quiet streets carrying the weight of an unseen terror. Laura Greene sat inside the sheriff's office, her face pale but her eyes hardened by determination. Sheriff Daniel Harris studied her closely, his voice low and steady as he asked, "Tell me again, Laura. What exactly did you see in those woods?" Laura's hands trembled, yet she forced herself to describe the blood on the tree and the Emily Green's scarf. Her voice cracked as she whispered, "It was hers. I know it." Sheriff Daniel Harris leaned back, rubbing his temples, torn between skepticism and concern. The narrator explained that his mind raced with the town's history, unsolved disappearances that seemed buried under silence. Laura slammed her fist against the desk and cried out, "No more silence! I need justice for Emily." The sheriff nodded grimly, realizing he could not dismiss her fear, for something dark was moving again in the woods. The narrator described how Sheriff Daniel Harris gathered his jacket and hat, preparing to revisit the forest with Laura Greene by his side. The tension between them grew, neither speaking as they stepped outside into the crisp morning air. The townsfolk watched from across the street, whispering nervously, their voices carrying the weight of old fears. Laura whispered, "They know something, but they'll never say it aloud." Sheriff Daniel Harris avoided her gaze, aware that silence had protected the town's reputation for too long. A woman named Sarah Mitchell pulled her son close, glancing at Laura with pity before vanishing into her shop. The sheriff muttered, "They're afraid the woods will claim another." The narrator revealed Laura's resolve burning brighter. Her sister Emily Greene's disappearance would not be hidden in shadows. Together they walked toward the edge of Pinewood, the looming forest waiting to swallow them whole once more. The narrator spoke of the oppressive silence that greeted Laura Greene and Sheriff Daniel Harris as they entered the woods once more. Mist clung to the ground like a living veil, muffling each step. Laura tightened her scarf, her voice low as she whispered, "It feels worse in the daylight, almost like it wants to hide its truth." The sheriff scanned the area, his hand resting near his holstered weapon. He muttered, "Evil doesn't vanish with the night." A broken branch cracked beneath their boots, the sound echoing unnaturally loud. Suddenly they spotted faint drag marks in the dirt, weaving deeper between the trees. Laura's breath caught as she bent down, brushing her fingers across the disturbed soil. "Emily was here," she whispered, her voice raw. Sheriff Daniel Harris exchanged a troubled glance with her, the realization dawning that this case was far from ordinary. The narrator revealed how the forest seemed to watch them, its branches clawing above like skeletal arms. Sheriff Daniel Harris stopped suddenly, raising a hand for silence. Laura Greene froze, her pulse racing as she followed his gaze. Half hidden in the undergrowth stood Michael Turner, a local hunter known for his solitary ways. His rugged face was shadowed beneath a cap, and his eyes darted nervously. Michael Turner said, "You shouldn't be here. The woods, they don't forgive." Laura's voice cracked with desperation as she demanded, "What do you know about Emily Greene?" Michael hesitated, his jaw tight, before muttering, "I've seen things I wish I hadn't." The narrator described how fear and guilt seemed to shroud his every word, as though he carried secrets too heavy for daylight. Sheriff Daniel Harris stepped forward, his voice sharp. "You're coming with us, Michael." The narrator explained that the three of them moved back toward the clearing, tension thick between every step. Laura Greene's thoughts screamed with questions, her heart begging for answers that Michael Turner refused to give. Sheriff Daniel Harris marched beside him, his hand never straying far from his sidearm. Michael Turner muttered, "There are things buried in those woods that should never be uncovered." Laura's eyes narrowed, her voice sharp as she said, "My sister Emily Greene deserved to live, and I won't stop until I know why she was taken." Michael flinched, his shoulders tightening. The narrator described how the wind rose, carrying the scent of earth and rot, as though the woods responded to their confrontation. Sheriff Daniel Harris whispered under his breath, "God help us if he's right." The narrator explained that Laura Greene and Sheriff Daniel Harris forced Michael Turner deeper into the sheriff's office for questioning, the room heavy with the scent of stale coffee and paper. Michael avoided their gaze, his hands fidgeting nervously on the table. Laura leaned forward, her voice sharp with grief as she asked, "What did you see out there the night Emily Greene vanished?" Michael shook his head, muttering, "Things you don't want to know, things that don't belong in daylight." Sheriff Daniel Harris pounded the desk, his voice firm. "Enough riddles, Michael. If you know something, speak." Michael's jaw tightened, his silence a weapon against their desperation. Laura whispered, "Emily was my sister. If you saw her last moments, you owe me the truth." The narrator revealed how the atmosphere grew suffocating, the weight of betrayal and secrets pressing against every word. The narrator described how Sheriff Daniel Harris and Laura Greene decided to revisit the forest clearing with Michael Turner reluctantly in tow. The morning fog clung stubbornly to the trees, the silence unnatural. Laura's steps faltered when she saw the drag marks now partly covered with fresh soil. She whispered, "Someone's been here since last night." Sheriff Daniel Harris scanned the ground, muttering, "They're covering tracks." Michael shifted uncomfortably, his eyes darting to the shadows. He murmured, "I told you, the woods don't forgive those who pry." Laura's eyes burned with determination as she said, "Then the woods will have to forgive me, because I won't stop until Emily Greene's voice is heard." The narrator explained that a faint rustle echoed beyond them, as though someone unseen was still watching. The narrator revealed that the deeper they walked, the more oppressive the air became, the silence broken by sudden echoes of distant snapping branches. Laura Greene whispered, "It feels like we're being hunted." Sheriff Daniel Harris raised his hand for silence, every muscle taut. Michael Turner exhaled heavily, muttering, "This is why no one talks. Some things in these woods, they listen." Suddenly, a torn scrap of fabric fluttered from a thorn bush. Laura's heart stopped as she pulled it free, recognizing Emily Greene's sweater. Tears welled as she whispered, "She was here. She was here." She fought. The sheriff's jaw hardened, muttering, "We're close to something, but we need to tread carefully." The narrator explained that betrayal lingered in Michael's silence, and each moment raised suspicion whether he was hiding more than he admitted. The narrator described how the group stumbled upon a shallow grave partially concealed by loose soil and leaves. Sheriff Daniel Harris knelt, brushing dirt aside with a trembling hand, while Laura Greene gasped, covering her mouth. She whispered, "Please, not Emily." Michael Turner shifted, muttering, "I warned you not to come." Sheriff Daniel Harris' voice cracked with urgency as he said, "This isn't fresh. Someone used this spot before." Laura cried softly, clutching the torn sweater, her body shaking. She whispered, "How many others have been buried here?" The narrator explained that horror and rage rippled through Laura's veins, her grief transforming into burning determination. Michael stepped back, his face pale, as though haunted by ghosts he had tried to bury. The narrator explained that the discovery of the grave left a chilling silence between them. Laura Greene turned on Michael Turner, her voice sharp with accusation. "You knew this was here. You've been keeping secrets." Michael's eyes darted as he muttered, "I've seen shadows bury their sins here, but it wasn't me." Sheriff Daniel Harris stepped closer, his tone stern. "Then who? Speak." Michael shook his head, fear clouding his eyes. The narrator revealed how Laura's grief sharpened into fury, her words piercing like knives as she cried, "Emily Greene deserved better than this silence." The forest rustled violently with a sudden gust, as though mocking their anguish, and the tension between truth and deception grew unbearable. The narrator described how dusk fell upon Pinewood, the fading sun casting long shadows that crawled across the town. Sheriff Daniel Harris returned to his office with Laura Greene and Michael Turner, their faces worn with fatigue and suspicion. Inside, Deputy Rachel Collins sorted through old case files, her brow furrowed. She said, "Sheriff, you need to see this. The disappearances from 10 years ago match the same patterns, always near the same woods." Laura gasped, clutching Emily Greene's scarf tighter, whispering, "This has been happening for years, and no one spoke up." Rachel Collins' face was grave as she added, "Someone high up has been burying these files." The sheriff muttered, "God help us. This goes deeper than we thought." The narrator revealed how betrayal stretched its fingers through every dusty file, pulling secrets into the open. The narrator revealed how Laura Greene's anger burned into desperation as she pored over the files. Photos of other victims stared back with hollow eyes. Laura whispered, "They all had families. They were loved, just like Emily Greene." Sheriff Daniel Harris rubbed his forehead, muttering, "If someone's covering this up, it could be someone close, someone we trust." Deputy Rachel Collins pointed to a signature repeated across multiple reports, her voice steady but fearful. "Judge Richard Coleman signed off on every one of these dismissals." Laura's eyes widened as she whispered, "He silenced the truth." The sheriff's shoulders slumped, realization dawning heavy. The narrator explained that the fragile veil of justice cracked open, exposing rot beneath its surface. The narrator described how night cloaked the town in silence as Laura Greene, Sheriff Daniel Harris, and Deputy Rachel Collins drove toward Judge Richard Coleman's house. Laura's voice trembled with anger as she whispered, "He held Emily's fate in his hands and he buried it." Sheriff Daniel Harris muttered, "If he's guilty, we'll find the proof tonight." The tires crunched on gravel as the mansion loomed, its windows glowing faintly like watchful eyes. Michael Turner, kept in custody, was left behind, his warning words still echoing. The narrator revealed how betrayal now had a name, and justice demanded confrontation. The narrator revealed how Judge Richard Coleman answered the door, his face stern, gray suit pressed, silver hair gleaming under porch light. He said, "Sheriff, to what do I owe this intrusion?" Sheriff Daniel Harris' jaw clenched as he replied, "We need answers, Judge, about the missing girls." Laura Greene stepped forward, clutching Emily Greene's scarf, her voice shaking with fury. You knew! You let it happen." Judge Richard Coleman's cold gaze didn't falter as he muttered, "Careful with your accusations." Deputy Rachel Collins produced the files, her voice sharp. "These signatures don't lie." The narrator described how silence thickened, and Richard Coleman's mask of authority began to slip. The narrator explained how Judge Richard Coleman's voice cracked as he muttered, "You don't understand what forces you're provoking." Laura Greene's fury erupted, her voice slicing through the night. "Emily Greene is gone because of men like you," Sheriff Daniel Harris demanded. "Who else is involved, Judge? Who are you protecting?" Richard Coleman's hand shook as he whispered, "There are things older than this town, and once you've seen them, you can never unsee." Deputy Rachel Collins stared in horror, her grip tightening on the files. The narrator revealed that with this confession, the investigation shattered open, and the enemy was no longer faceless. Betrayal had revealed itself, and the hunt for justice was now irreversibly transformed. The narrator revealed that the courthouse basement echoed with the sound of heavy footsteps as Sheriff Daniel Harris led Laura Greene and Deputy Rachel Collins toward the hidden records. Judge Richard Coleman had been forced to unlock the door, his hands trembling. Laura's voice shook with fury as she whispered, "Emily Greene's truth is behind these walls." Richard muttered, "You don't know what you're asking to uncover?" Sheriff Daniel Harris growled, "We'll decide that." The narrator explained how the iron door creaked open, revealing stacks of dusty crates, each marked with names of missing victims. Laura gasped, clutching Emily Greene's scarf tighter as her tears fell. She whispered, "They were all silenced, every single one of them." The sheriff's jaw tightened, rage simmering, as Richard's mask cracked into fear. The narrator described how Laura Greene pulled open a crate, revealing files and personal items of victims long forgotten. A small locket fell into her palm and she whispered, "Emily Greene wore one just like this." Deputy Rachel Collins flipped through reports, her voice sharp. "These were all buried to protect reputations." Sheriff Daniel Harris' face hardened as he said, "Richard Coleman, your time of hiding behind robes is done." The judge stammered, "You don't understand. They were sacrificed to something darker." Laura's voice trembled but grew louder. "No more lies. Emily Greene wasn't a sacrifice. She was my sister, and you will answer for her." The narrator explained how the confrontation turned raw, rage and fear colliding like thunder. The narrator revealed how chaos erupted when the courthouse lights flickered violently, plunging them into darkness. Laura Greene gasped, whispering, "He's not working alone." Sheriff Daniel Harris drew his revolver, his voice echoing, "Stay close." Suddenly, Michael Turner appeared from the shadows, escorted in by officers, his face pale with officers. His face pale. "Dread," he muttered. "You don't understand. The Woods claimed them, not us," Laura cried. "You knew and did nothing." Michael's voice cracked. "I was scared. They warned me." The sheriff roared, "Who warned you?" The narrator described how silence lingered before Michael whispered a name, none expected, sending shock waves through the group and revealing betrayal more poisonous than they imagined. The narrator explained how Michael Turner's trembling lips finally parted, whispering, "Sheriff Daniel Harris, it was you who silenced the first case years ago." Laura Greene gasped, her body shaking, whispering, "No, it can't be." The sheriff's face twisted with rage and sorrow, his gun hand trembling. He growled, "I did what I had to do to protect this town." Rachel Collins stepped back, horror etched across her face. She said, "You buried the truth." Laura screamed, "Emily Greene is dead because of your silence." The sheriff's voice cracked, "I never meant for her to be taken." The narrator described how betrayal struck like a knife, ripping apart fragile trust and leaving only fury and despair in its place. The narrator described how the confrontation exploded into violence. Laura Greene lunged forward, screaming, "Emily Greene deserves justice." Sheriff Daniel Harris fired a warning shot into the ceiling, his voice breaking. "Stay back, Laura. You don't understand what's coming." Deputy Rachel Collins raised her weapon, her hands shaking. She said, "Put the gun down, Sheriff." Michael Turner shouted, "You can't fight it. The Woods already own us." Richard Coleman collapsed into a chair, muttering, "It's too late for redemption." The narrator explained how chaos roared through the basement, their fragile unity shattered. The truth now stood naked, and justice had turned into a war between loyalty, grief, and survival. The narrator described how dawn broke with a pale gray light over Pinewood, the storm of truth still echoing from the courthouse basement. Laura Greene sat on the courthouse steps, Emily Greene's torn scarf pressed against her chest. Her eyes were swollen from tears, but steadied by resolve. Sheriff Daniel Harris sat nearby in handcuffs, guarded by Deputy Rachel Collins. His voice was hoarse as he muttered, "I wanted to protect the town, but I failed them all." Laura's voice shook. "You failed Emily Greene." She trusted the world to protect her, and instead, it buried her. The sheriff's shoulders slumped, his silence heavy. Rachel Collins' stern face softened for a moment as she whispered, "Justice doesn't erase pain, but it ends the silence." The narrator revealed how Laura stared at the rising sun, her grief unbroken but her determination now a shield against despair. The narrator explained how townsfolk gathered outside, their whispers turning into angry murmurs as word spread of Judge Richard Coleman's corruption. Sarah Mitchell clutched her son, Ethan Mitchell, tightly, whispering, "We've lived in fear too long." Laura Greene stood and faced the crowd, her voice trembling but clear. "Emily Greene's death exposed what has been hidden. No more silence. We demand truth." Richard Coleman was escorted past the crowd, his once proud posture broken, his face pale with shame. Sheriff Daniel Harris lowered his head, unable to meet their eyes. Rachel Collins raised her voice. The crimes of Pinewood were buried, but no longer. The narrator revealed how, for the first time, the town confronted its shadows together. The narrator described how Laura Greene walked back into the woods, alone, later that morning, the mist still curling low over the ground. She stopped near the old oak tree where she had first found Emily Greene's scarf. Her voice cracked as she whispered, "I kept my promise, Emily. The world knows now." The wind moved through the branches like a sigh, and Laura's tears fell freely onto the soil. She knelt, pressing the scarf against the roots as though returning it to the earth. The narrator revealed how grief and peace blended in her heart, fragile but real. She whispered again, "You're not forgotten, Emily. Never again." The narrator explained how Deputy Rachel Collins returned to her office, sorting files with steady hands, determined to rebuild trust in the law. She muttered, "This town deserves more than shadows and silence." Michael Turner, though not free from suspicion, offered a quiet warning before being taken into custody. He said, "The woods don't forget. They'll always take back what was stolen." Rachel's jaw clenched, but she whispered, "Then we'll stand guard, no matter what it costs." The narrator revealed how the weight of leadership fell upon her shoulders, but unlike before, it was carried with open eyes and unshaken resolve. The narrator revealed how, as evening fell, Laura Greene visited the small cemetery on the edge of Pinewood. She stood before Emily Greene's gravestone, her voice trembling. "They can't hurt you anymore. Justice has found its way." She placed fresh flowers at the base, her tears falling silently. Rachel Collins approached quietly, resting a hand on Laura's shoulder. She whispered, "Emily's truth changed this town forever." Laura nodded, whispering, "Her voice lives through mine." The narrator explained how the sun dipped below the horizon, leaving a final glow over the gravesite. The woods loomed in the distance, their shadows endless. But Pinewood was no longer silent. Justice had been won, though the scars would always remain. The narrator described how the night returned to Pinewood with a heavy silence, the courthouse lights extinguished, and the town blanketed in unease. Laura Greene walked alone through the empty streets, Emily Greene's red scarf draped around her shoulders. Her footsteps echoed like memories refusing to fade. She whispered, "Emily, your voice will never die." Behind her, distant church bells tolled, a reminder of both endings and beginnings. The wind carried faint laughter from unseen corners, cruel and haunting. Laura stopped, her chest heavy, as though the woods were whispering still. The narrator explained that justice had been delivered, but the scars would remain forever etched into Pinewood's soil. The narrator explained how Laura Greene's path took her to the edge of the forest, its trees standing tall like sentinels. She stopped where the mist thickened, her breath quickening. She whispered, "Emily Greene, I faced them for you." The trees swayed, and for a moment, the silence broke with the faint sound of a child's laugh, eerie and out of place. Laura trembled, her eyes glistening, but she did not turn back. The narrator revealed that though the forest had stolen lives, it no longer held Laura's silence captive. The narrator revealed how, inside the jailhouse, Sheriff Daniel Harris sat alone in his cell, his hands folded, face shadowed by regret. His voice trembled as he whispered into the emptiness, "I only wanted to protect them, but the truth consumed me." Deputy Rachel Collins stood silently outside the bars, her face unreadable. The files clutched in her hand. She whispered, "Justice means facing what you buried." The sheriff lowered his head, his silence an unspoken confession. The narrator described how even behind bars, his guilt weighed heavier than any iron lock. The narrator explained how Judge Richard Coleman was led into the courtroom one final time, his proud bearing broken. Townsfolk filled the benches, their eyes burning with resentment. Sarah Mitchell clutched Ethan Mitchell, whispering, "At last, justice." Richard's voice cracked as he muttered, "I thought I could control it, but the truth was always stronger." The narrator described how the gavel struck, sealing his fate as silence filled the room. The people of Pinewood felt a burden lift, though the forest still loomed as an unhealed wound. The narrator described how Laura Greene returned once more to Emily Greene's grave at twilight. The sky glowed faint orange before fading into darkness. She placed a single candle at the stone, her voice a trembling vow. "They will remember you, Emily. Your silence is broken." A tear slipped down her cheek as the flame flickered, casting shadows that danced like ghosts. Rachel Collins stepped quietly behind, offering silent companionship. The narrator revealed that though the woods would always remain a scar on Pinewood, Emily Greene's voice had become eternal. The screen faded to black, and the sound of a door slamming echoed, final and haunting.